The scissors glinted silver against the afternoon light streaming through my kitchen window, their metallic surface catching fragments of sunlight like broken promises. Maya's 3-year-old curls, those perfect spirals I had spent countless mornings gently detangling with coconut oil and patience, lay scattered across my linoleum floor like fallen autumn leaves. Each severed strand held precious memories of bedtime stories and morning cuddles. Creating these compelling family stories takes tremendous time and effort to research and write. If you're finding this story engaging, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real-life family drama stories. What have you done? The words escaped my throat as barely more than a whisper, but they carried the weight of a mother's breaking heart. My sister Jessica stood frozen beside my kitchen table, the evidence of her impulsive decisions still clutched in her trembling hands. Maya sat in her booster seat, small shoulders shaking with confused sobs. I thought it would look cute, Jessica stammered, her voice cracking under the weight of her own shock at what she had done. Like a pixie cut. I saw it on Pinterest and… Pinterest? I stepped closer, my bare feet crushing the curls beneath them, each step a small desecration of something precious that could never be restored. You gave my 3-year-old daughter a haircut because of something you saw on Pinterest? The kitchen fell silent except for Maya's sniffles and the refrigerator's hum. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't think. No, you didn't think. My voice was steadier now, though my hands shook as I knelt beside Maya's chair. You never think, Jess. That's always been your problem. I reached out to touch what remained of my daughter's hair, feeling the uneven, choppy lengths where Jessica's inexperienced hands had worked. Maya's scalp showed through in places where the cuts had gone too close, and I could see the red marks from where the scissors had pulled too hard. My beautiful baby girl, who had never had more than a trim of her split ends, now looked like she had been through a trauma, which, in many ways, she had. Mama? Maya's voice was small and uncertain. My hair? All gone? The innocence in her question nearly broke me. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that sometimes the people who are supposed to love and protect you make decisions that hurt you? How do you help them understand that love and harm can exist in the same action, performed by the same person? Not all gone, sweetheart, I whispered, kissing her forehead while carefully avoiding looking at the full extent of the damage. But Aunt Jessie made a big mistake. Jessica moved toward us, her perfectly styled hair seeming to mock the destruction she had caused. Sarah, please, let me fix this. I know a really good salon. Fix this? I stood up so quickly that the chair scraped against the floor. Jessica, look at her. Really look at what you've done. For the first time since I had walked into my kitchen to find this scene, Jessica truly examined Maya's appearance. I watched her face change as the reality of her actions became undeniable. Maya's hair, which had grown for 3 years without ever being cut, a choice I had made carefully, wanting to preserve every precious moment of her childhood, was now destroyed. Chunks were missing entirely, while other sections stuck out at odd angles. It looked exactly like what it was, the work of someone with no training, no experience, and no permission. Oh, God, Jessica breathed, her hand covering her mouth. Oh my God, what did I do? You violated our trust, I said quietly. You took something that wasn't yours to take. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with all the history they carried. Jessica had always been impulsive, always acted first, and considered consequences later. In high school, it was dyeing her hair blue without telling our parents, or skipping class to drive to the beach. In college, it was dropping out of pre-med to pursue photography, then switching to art history, then switching again to business. As adults, it was quitting jobs without notice, dating men who treated her poorly, making financial decisions that left her calling Dad for money. But this was different. This wasn't just Jessica being Jessica anymore. This was my child. I trusted you, I continued, my voice growing stronger. When you asked to spend the afternoon with Maya while I ran errands, I trusted you. When you said you wanted to be a better aunt, wanted to help more, I believed you. I came home early because I missed her, and wanted to surprise you both with ice cream. The grocery bags I had dropped when I first saw the scene still sat by the front door, their contents probably melting or warming in the spring heat. The ice cream, strawberry, Maya's favorite, would be ruined now, just like everything else about this day. "I know you didn't mean to hurt her," I said, watching as Maya played with the remaining tufts of her hair, trying to understand what had happened to her reflection. "But Jessica, meaning well isn't enough anymore. We're not kids. I'm not your little sister who can just forgive and forget, because family is family. I'm Maya's mother first." Jessica sank into one of the kitchen chairs, the same chairs that had been in this house when I bought it 2 years ago, sturdy oak pieces that the previous owner had left behind, along with the curtains and the garden tools, and all the other remnants of a life that had outgrown this space. "What can I do? Tell me how to fix this." "You can't," I said simply. "That's what you need to understand. Some things can't be fixed." The afternoon light was shifting now, growing longer and more golden as it stretched across the kitchen floor, illuminating the scattered curls like evidence at a crime scene. In a few hours, my husband David would come home from his shift at the fire station, and I would have to explain what had happened. I would have to find words to describe not just the physical damage, but the emotional violation that came with it. Maya reached her small hands up toward her head, patting around for the curls that were no longer there. "Mama, where my pretty hair?" Before I could answer, Jessica spoke up. "Maya, sweetie, Aunt Jessica was trying to make you look like a princess, but I made a mistake. I'm sorry." The simplicity of the explanation felt insufficient, but Maya's 3-year-old brain seemed to accept it with the resilience that children possess. She nodded solemnly, then looked at me with those bright brown eyes. Eyes like mine, like our mother's, like the eyes that would look back at her from mirrors for the rest of her life. "I still pretty, Mama?" The question pierced through all my anger and hurt, cutting straight to the core of what mattered. "You are always pretty, baby girl. Always beautiful. Hair doesn't make you beautiful. You make your hair beautiful." But even as I said the words, I knew they were more complex than Maya could understand. I knew that she would face questions at daycare tomorrow, that other children might stare or comment. I knew that every photo from this period of her life would carry the evidence of this day, would require explanation to future boyfriends and friends, and maybe even her own children someday. Jessica stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that looked out over our small backyard. The swing set David had installed last month sat empty, moving slightly in the breeze that carried the scent of the neighbor's barbecue and the faint sound of children playing in distant yards. It was the kind of perfect spring afternoon that should have been filled with laughter and maybe a trip to the park, not this heavy silence and scattered hair. "I should call Mom and Dad," Jessica said quietly. The words sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Our parents, Dad especially, had strong opinions about family loyalty and protecting the children. He had been career military before retiring to a small business consulting firm, and his sense of duty and protection ran deep. He adored Maya, called her his little general, and never missed her birthday or any milestone. "No," I said quickly, "not yet. But Sarah, they should know. And maybe Dad can..." "Dad can what, Jessica? Order Maya's hair to grow back?" I shook my head. "This is between us right now." But I knew that wouldn't last. Our family wasn't the type to keep secrets, especially not ones that involved the children. Dad would find out eventually, probably from Maya herself, who loved to tell Grandpa about everything that happened in her day during their weekly video calls. When he saw her hair, when he heard what had happened, there would be consequences that none of us were prepared for. Jessica turned from the window, her face pale in the shifting light. "What if I pay for the best children's salon in the city? What if I buy her the most expensive hat collection? What if you stop trying to buy your way out of this?" The sharpness in my voice surprised even me. "Jessica, this isn't about money. This isn't about finding the right solution to make it go away. This is about the fact that you made a decision about my child's body without asking me." The word hung in the air, body, because that's what hair was, wasn't it? Part of Maya's physical self, part of how she experienced and presented herself to the world. In our family, we had always been careful about bodily autonomy, about teaching Maya that her body belonged to her, that she had the right to say no to hugs she didn't want, to choose her own clothes, to have her preferences respected. I never thought of it that way, Jessica whispered. That's the problem, I replied. You didn't think of it at all. Maya had grown quiet during our conversation, playing with a small wooden horse that lived in the kitchen for moments exactly like this, when we needed something to occupy her hands while we talked about grown-up things. But I could see her listening, processing, trying to understand the tension that filled the room like smoke from a distant fire. "Mama's sad?" she asked, looking up at me with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see too much for someone so young. "Mama's upset," I said, choosing my words carefully. "But not at you, baby. Never at you." "Aunt Jessie sad too?" I looked over at my sister, who was wiping tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand. Her mascara had smudged, creating dark circles under her eyes that made her look younger and more vulnerable than her 31 years. She looked like she had when we were children, and she had broken something valuable: our grandmother's music box, Dad's model airplane, Mom's favorite vase, and was waiting to hear what the consequences would be. "Yes," I said softly, "Aunt Jessica is sad too." "We all sad about my hair?" The simple question from my 3-year-old daughter somehow captured the entire tragedy of the situation. Yes, we were all sad about her hair, but more than that, we were sad about the trust that had been broken, the innocence that had been lost, the way that one thoughtless moment had changed everything between us. "Sometimes," I told Maya, lifting her out of the high chair and holding her close, "sometimes people we love make mistakes that hurt us. It doesn't mean they don't love us, but it still hurts." As I held my daughter, feeling the strange new texture of her ruined hair against my cheek, I wondered if this was how cycles of family trauma began. Not with dramatic events or obvious cruelty, but with moments like this, moments when love and harm intertwined so completely that they became impossible to separate. Moments when good intentions created lasting scars, when the people who should protect us become the ones who hurt us most. The phone rang suddenly, its shrill tone cutting through the heavy silence of the kitchen. All 3 of us jumped, and Maya buried her face against my shoulder. "Don't answer it," Jessica said quickly. But I could see the caller ID from where I stood. It was David, probably calling to check in during his break at the station, probably expecting to hear about our quiet afternoon and maybe make plans for dinner. "I have to," I said. "It's David." As I reached for the phone, Maya still in my arms, I caught sight of us in the reflection of the microwave door. We looked like survivors of some small disaster, which, in many ways, we were. My hair was messy from running my hands through it, Jessica's makeup was streaked with tears, and Maya looked like a child who had been through something she didn't understand, something that had changed her appearance so dramatically that she might not recognize herself in photographs. The phone kept ringing, insistent and demanding. In a few seconds, David would hear my voice and immediately know something was wrong. He had that ability to read my emotional state through the smallest changes in tone or pacing. It came from years of loving me, years of paying attention to the subtle ways that stress or sadness affected my speech. What would I tell him? How would I explain that his daughter's beautiful hair was gone, that my sister had taken something precious without permission, that our family dynamics had just shifted in a way that couldn't be undone? As my finger hovered over the answer button, I realized that this phone call would be the beginning of something larger, something that would ripple outward through our family like stones thrown into still water. David would be hurt and angry. He would want to protect Maya and me. He would want answers and accountability. And eventually, he would call my father. I pressed the answer button with trembling fingers, Maya still nestled against my shoulder, her shortened hair tickling my neck in an unfamiliar way that made my stomach clench with fresh grief. "Hey, beautiful," David's warm voice filled the kitchen through the speakerphone. "How's my girls? Maya being good for Aunt Jessica?" The normalcy of his greeting felt like salt in an open wound. Just 3 hours ago, I could have answered that question with easy laughter, maybe put Maya on the phone to babble about her afternoon. Now the words stuck in my throat like broken glass. "David," I managed, my voice barely steady. "Something happened." The quality of silence on the other end changed immediately. David had been a firefighter for 8 years, long enough to recognize the tone that preceded bad news, long enough to know when someone was struggling to find words for something terrible. Are you hurt? Is Maya okay? His voice sharpened, and I could picture him straightening in whatever chair he occupied at Station 19, probably already reaching for his keys. We're not hurt, I said carefully, catching Jessica's eye across the kitchen. She had moved to the sink, ostensibly washing the scissors, but I could see her shoulders shaking. But Jessica cut Maya's hair. The silence stretched so long that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then, cut her hair? Like, trimmed it? No, I whispered. Cut it. All of it. It's really bad, David. Jesus Christ. The profanity slipped out before he could catch it, something that rarely happened when he knew Maya was listening. How bad? I looked down at my daughter, who was playing with the collar of my shirt, blissfully unaware that her father was processing the same shock and anger that I had experienced 20 minutes earlier. Bad enough that we'll need to take her to a professional to fix it. Bad enough that she looks, I struggled for words that wouldn't frighten Maya, different. I'm coming home. David, you don't need to… Sarah. His voice held the tone he used when he was making decisions about emergency situations, when there was no room for negotiation. I'm coming home. Right now. The line went dead before I could protest further. I knew David would be walking out of the station within minutes, would be driving home with that focused intensity he brought to crisis situations. He would arrive in exactly 18 minutes. I knew because I had timed the route from Station 19 to our house hundreds of times during the early days of our marriage, when I worried about emergencies and response times and all the ways that loving a first responder meant living with controlled anxiety. He's coming home, I told Jessica, who had turned from the sink with the clean scissors in her hands. They looked harmless now, just ordinary kitchen shears, but I would never see them the same way again. What do I do? Jessica asked. Should I leave? Should I stay and explain? The question highlighted everything that was wrong with this situation. Jessica was 31 years old, a successful marketing director with her own apartment and car in life. She shouldn't need guidance on how to handle the consequences of her actions. But this was Jessica, brilliant and creative and loving, but eternally convinced that someone else would handle the difficult parts of life. That's your choice, I said, settling Maya into her playpen in the living room with her favorite stuffed elephant. But if you leave now, if you run away from this, we won't recover from it. Jessica followed me into the living room. Our childhood home's layout so familiar that we moved through it without conscious thought. This house had belonged to our maternal grandmother before I bought it, and every room held layers of family memory. The living room still had Grandma Rose's china cabinet, now filled with Maya's books and toys instead of delicate figurines. The mantelpiece displayed photos that chronicled our family's evolution. My parents, wedding portrait, Jessica and me as children in matching Easter dresses, David and me on our wedding day, Maya's newborn photos. Soon I realized all of Maya's future photos would be divided into two categories, before and after this day. I don't want to run away, Jessica said quietly. I just don't know how to face David when he gets here, or how to face Dad when he finds out. The mention of our father sent another wave of dread through me. General Robert Mason, retired, but still carrying the bearing and expectations of his military career, had very clear ideas about responsibility and consequences. He had raised Jessica and me with love, but also with the understanding that actions had repercussions, that mistakes required accountability, that protecting family meant facing difficult truths. Dad's going to find out eventually, I said, sinking onto the couch where Maya and I read stories every night before bed. You know Maya talks to him twice a week. The minute she sees him on video chat, he's gonna notice. Jessica sat across from me in the armchair that had been our grandmother's favorite spot, where she used to knit afghans and watch her soap operas. Maybe her hair will grow some by then. Jessica, I looked at her directly, forcing her to meet my eyes. It's been 20 years since you could solve problems by hoping they would disappear. This isn't going away. Dad is going to see what happened, and he's going to want answers. My mind drifted to the last time our father had been truly disappointed in one of us. Jessica was 26, and she had borrowed money from Mom and Dad to start a photography business, then spent half of it on a vacation to Europe with a boyfriend who left her stranded in Rome. Dad had flown overseas to bring her home, and the conversation that followed lasted 3 hours and included phrases like failure to plan, and betrayal of trust, and consequences of poor judgment. This felt bigger than that. This involved his granddaughter. Maya babbled happily from her playpen, building towers with soft blocks and knocking them down again. She had adapted to her changed appearance with the resilience of childhood, but I knew the real test would come tomorrow at daycare, when other children noticed and asked questions. 3-year-olds weren't known for their tact. "Tell me about your morning," I said to Jessica, genuinely trying to understand how this had happened. "Walk me through it. What were you thinking?" Jessica rubbed her temples, a gesture inherited from our mother, who did the same thing when she was processing stress. "We were having such a good time. We made breakfast together. Well, Maya helped me scramble eggs while I tried to keep her from breaking anything. Then we played with her dollhouse and she was being so sweet, calling me her favorite aunt." "Her only aunt," I pointed out, but without malice. "Right," Jessica managed a small smile. "Then she spilled juice on her shirt, so we went upstairs to change, and she was looking at herself in the mirror in your bedroom. She was playing with her hair, twirling it around her fingers, and she said something about wanting to look like Princess Anna from Frozen." The bedroom mirror, a full-length antique that had belonged to David's grandmother, had been Maya's favorite place to play dress-up and practice funny faces. I could picture the scene, Maya standing on the small step stool I kept there for her, admiring her reflection, while Jessica watched with the indulgent smile she reserved for her niece. "And that made you think of cutting her hair?" "Not at first," Jessica said quickly. "At first, I just told her she was beautiful the way she was. But then I started thinking about how cute she would look with shorter hair. And I remembered seeing this Pinterest board about little girls, hairstyles, and I thought—" She trailed off, seeming to recognize how insufficient her reasoning sounded. "You thought what, Jess?" "I thought it would be a fun surprise for you. I thought you would come home and see how adorable she looked, and you would be happy that I had done something special with her." Jessica's voice cracked. "I thought I was being a good aunt." The tragedy of good intentions. I could see it so clearly now. Jessica, who had always struggled with feeling useful in our family dynamic, who had watched me become a mother with a mixture of admiration and insecurity, thinking she had found a way to contribute something meaningful. She had probably imagined my reaction as delight rather than horror, probably envisioned Maya's excitement at her new look, rather than confusion and tears. "Where did you get the scissors?" I asked. "From your kitchen drawer, the regular ones you use for opening packages." I closed my eyes, picturing those dull-bladed scissors that I had bought at the grocery store, scissors meant for cutting tape and cardboard, not the delicate hair of a 3-year-old child. Of course, the cut would be uneven and harsh. Jessica had used the wrong tool for an impossible task. "Did Maya ask you to cut her hair?" "She said she wanted to look pretty. When I suggested shorter hair, she seemed excited." Jessica paused. "But Sarah, she's 3. She doesn't really understand what shorter hair means. I should have asked you first. I should have waited." Should have, could have, would have. The phrases that followed every family disaster. Every moment when someone's judgment failed and left everyone else to deal with the aftermath. The sound of David's truck in the driveway cut through my thoughts. He was 2 minutes early, which meant he had driven faster than he should have, probably calling in favors to leave his shift early. I heard the slam of his door, the quick stride across our front porch, the jingle of keys as he unlocked the door. "Daddy!" Maya called out, recognizing the sounds of his arrival even from her playpen. "Hey, baby girl," David called back, but I could hear the tension in his voice, the way he was trying to sound normal for Maya's sake while preparing himself for whatever he was about to see. His footsteps crossed the hardwood floor of our entryway, and then he appeared in the living room doorway. David looked exactly like what he was, a man who had dropped everything to rush home to his family, still wearing his Navy Station 19 t-shirt and work pants, his hair slightly messed from running his hands through it during the drive home. His eyes found Maya first, and I watched his expression change as he processed what he was seeing. The shock, the disbelief, the anger, it all flickered across his face in the span of seconds before he managed to compose his features for Maya's benefit. "Oh, sweetheart," he said softly, moving to kneel beside her playpen. "What happened to your beautiful hair?" Maya looked up at him with complete trust. unaware of the storm of emotion in his voice. "Aunt Jessie made me pretty like Princess Anna," she said proudly, patting her uneven locks. David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a sign I recognized after 6 years of marriage. He was furious but working hard not to show it in front of Maya. When he looked up at me, then over at Jessica, his eyes held a coldness I had never seen directed at my family before. "Can you take Maya upstairs for her bath?" he asked me, his tone carefully neutral. "I think Jessica and I need to talk." The request was reasonable, but I could hear what he really meant. He needed Maya out of the room before he said the things that were building pressure behind his controlled expression. I looked at Jessica, who had gone pale with the understanding that she was about to face David's anger without my mediation. "David?" I started, but he shook his head. "Please, Sarah, just give us a few minutes." I lifted Maya from her playpen, noting how different her weight distribution felt without the hair I was used to brushing away from her face. As we walked toward the stairs, I heard David's voice behind us, low and tight with controlled fury. "Jessica, what the hell were you thinking?" I quickened my pace, not wanting Maya to hear whatever came next, but her voice carried clearly from the living room. "I know how angry you must be. Angry doesn't begin to cover it." I closed the bathroom door behind us and turned on the water for Maya's bath, hoping the sound would mask the conversation happening downstairs. Maya chatted happily as I helped her out of her clothes, telling me about her day with Aunt Jessica, about the eggs they had made together, about the game they had played with her dolls. "Mama, why Daddy sound mad?" she asked as I tested the water temperature. "Daddy's not mad at you, baby," I said, lifting her into the tub. "Sometimes grown-ups have to have serious talks about important things." "About my hair?" "Yes, about your hair." Maya considered this as I poured water over her head with a plastic cup, watching the way her shortened locks barely moved in the water that used to require careful rinsing to remove all the shampoo from her longer curls. "My hair grow back?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart. Hair always grows back, it just takes time." But even as I said it, I knew that some things about this day would never grow back. The trust between Jessica and me, the easy assumption that family members would respect boundaries, the innocence of Maya's appearance that marked her as a baby rather than a little girl, all of that was gone permanently. From downstairs, I could hear the rise and fall of voices, David's deep tone mixing with Jessica's higher pitch in a conversation that sounded increasingly heated. I couldn't make out specific words through the old house's solid construction, but the rhythm of their exchange told its own story: accusation, defense, explanation, rejection. Maya played with her bath toys, oblivious to the adult drama swirling around her changed appearance. She was adapting with the flexibility of childhood, already incorporating her new look into her sense of self. By tomorrow, she probably wouldn't remember having longer hair, but photos would remind her, and stories would be told, and someday she would understand that this day marked a turning point in our family dynamics. "All clean, Mama," Maya announced, standing up in the shallow water. As I wrapped her in a fluffy towel, one of the set David's mother had given us when Maya was born, embroidered with tiny yellow ducks, I realized that we would need to take photos soon to document the damage for the insurance claim we would file with the salon that would try to fix Jessica's mistake. The thought of photographing my daughter's ruined hair, of creating a permanent record of this violation, made my stomach turn. "Let's get you dressed for dinner," I said, carrying her to the bedroom she had been using less and less lately, preferring to fall asleep in our bed during story time and get carried to her own room later. As I helped Maya into her favorite pajamas, soft pink cotton with unicorns that she had chosen herself during our last shopping trip, I could hear that the conversation downstairs had quieted. Either David and Jessica had reached some kind of resolution, or one of them had walked away from the discussion. "Mama, we eat dinner soon?" Maya asked, climbing onto her toddler bed and reaching for the stuffed elephant that went everywhere with her. "Soon, baby. Daddy and Aunt Jessica are still talking." "About my hair still?" "Probably." Maya nodded with the acceptance of a child accustomed to adult conversations that revolved around topics she didn't fully understand. She had lived through David's and my discussions about mortgage payments and work schedules and family planning without being concerned that these serious tones meant anything threatening to her world. But this felt different. This conversation was about her, about something that had been done to her, about the way that family relationships could shift when trust was broken. A knock on the bedroom door interrupted my thoughts. "Sarah?" David's voice was calmer now, but I could still hear the underlying tension. "Can you come downstairs for a minute?" "Maya, want to watch a movie while the grown-ups talk?" Maya clapped her hands with excitement. Movie time was a special treat usually reserved for sick days or rainy weekends. David appeared in the doorway with the tablet we used for emergencies, already queued up with one of Maya's favorite animated films. "I'll be right downstairs, baby," I told her, kissing her forehead and inhaling the familiar scent of her baby shampoo mixed with the unfamiliar feeling of her shortened hair against my lips. In the living room, I found Jessica sitting on the couch with red-rimmed eyes, while David stood by the window, his arms crossed over his chest. The body language told me everything I needed to know about how their conversation had gone. "We need to talk about next steps," David said without preamble. "Jessica agrees that she needs to pay for whatever it costs to fix this, and she's going to call around tomorrow to find the best children's salon in the area." I looked at my sister, who nodded silently. And we need to decide how to handle telling your parents." The elephant in the room finally acknowledged. I sank into the armchair Jessica had vacated, suddenly feeling exhausted by the weight of decisions that needed to be made, consequences that needed to be managed. "We could wait," I suggested half-heartedly. "See how much the salon can fix, maybe take new photos before Dad's next video call with Maya." David shook his head. "Sarah, you know that's not realistic. Your dad calls Maya every Wednesday and Saturday. Today is Tuesday. Even if we got her to a salon tomorrow, which probably isn't possible without an appointment, she's still going to look obviously different." He was right, and we all knew it. Dad had been a military officer for 26 years. He noticed details, patterns, changes. He would take one look at Maya through the computer screen and immediately know that something had happened to her hair. "What if I call him?" Jessica offered quietly. "What if I explain what happened before he sees her?" David and I exchanged glances. The idea had merit. At least it would give Dad context before the visual shock of seeing Maya's appearance. But it also meant that Jessica would have to face his disappointment and anger over the phone, without the softening effect of Maya's presence. "Are you prepared for that conversation?" I asked. Jessica's laugh was hollow. "I'm not prepared for any of this, Sarah. I'm 31 years old, and I feel like I'm about to get called to the principal's office." The comparison was more accurate than she probably realized. Dad had always been the family disciplinarian, the one who delivered consequences and expectations with military precision. Even as adults, Jessica and I still sought his approval and feared his disappointment in ways that we probably should have outgrown. "There's something else," David said, moving away from the window to sit beside me on the couch. "I think we need to consider whether Jessica should be alone with Maya for a while." The words hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Jessica's face went white, and I felt my stomach drop with the understanding of what David was suggesting. "David," I started, but he held up a hand. "I'm not saying permanently. I'm not saying Jessica is a bad person or that she doesn't love Maya. But Sarah, she made a major decision about our daughter's appearance without consulting us. She used inappropriate tools and had no idea what she was doing. Maya could have been hurt." "But she wasn't hurt," Jessica protested. "This time," David replied firmly, "this time she wasn't hurt. But what about next time, when you decide she would look cute with painted nails using adult nail polish? Or when you think she's old enough for earrings? Or when you decide she needs different clothes than what Sarah packed?" Each hypothetical scenario hit like a physical blow. David was articulating fears I hadn't yet allowed myself to fully form. That this wasn't just a one-time mistake, but evidence of a pattern of poor judgment that could escalate if not addressed. "I would never do anything to hurt Maya," Jessica said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You already did," David replied, not unkindly but without compromise. "You did hurt her, you hurt Sarah, you hurt our family. And until we understand how this happened and what's going to prevent it from happening again, I don't think you should be responsible for Maya's care." The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica stared at David with the expression of someone who had just been told that the ground beneath their feet was no longer solid. I felt torn between my loyalty to my sister and my agreement with my husband's logic. "For how long?" Jessica asked in a whisper. "I don't know," David admitted. "That depends on a lot of things. On how you handle the next few days. On how Maya recovers from this. On whether your parents think you've learned from this experience." "You're gonna tell Mom and Dad that I can't be trusted with Maya?" Jessica's voice cracked on her daughter's name. "We're gonna tell them the truth," I said, finding my voice for the first time since David had laid out his conditions. "We're gonna tell them what happened, and we're gonna let them help us figure out how to move forward." Jessica stood up abruptly, pacing to the same window where she had stood earlier, looking out at the backyard where Maya's swing moved gently in the evening breeze. "This is going to destroy everything, isn't it? Mom and Dad are going to think I'm completely irresponsible. You're never going to trust me again. Maya's going to grow up thinking her aunt is the person who ruined her hair." The pain in her voice was genuine, and despite my anger, I felt a familiar surge of protectiveness toward my sister. Jessica had always been harder on herself than anyone else could be, always convinced that her mistakes defined her more than her intentions or her love. "Jess," I said softly, "this doesn't have to destroy everything, but it has to change things." She turned from the window, her face streaked with tears. "I don't know how to change. I don't know how to be different than I am." "Maybe that's where we start," David suggested, his tone softer than it had been since he arrived home. "Maybe we start with figuring out why you thought this was okay, and what needs to happen to make sure you don't make similar decisions in the future." I looked at my husband, grateful for his ability to balance firmness with compassion, consequences with hope for redemption. This was why Maya was lucky to have him as a father. He understood that discipline meant teaching, not just punishment. "I think," I said slowly, "we need to call Mom and Dad tonight, before Maya's Wednesday call. Jessica, you should be the one to tell them what happened, and David and I will be there to help explain what we're doing about it." Jessica nodded, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her designer blouse. "Okay, yes, that's probably best." From upstairs, we could hear Maya laughing at something in her movie, the sound carrying through the old house's thin walls like a reminder of what we were all fighting to protect. Her innocence, her trust, her belief that the adults in her life would always make good decisions on her behalf. "There's one more thing," I said, the realization hitting me suddenly. "We need to prepare for what happens when other people see her. Daycare tomorrow, the grocery store, church on Sunday. People are going to ask questions." David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he had inherited from his own father, I had learned from family photos. "What do we tell them?" "The truth," I said. "A family member made a mistake with her hair, and we're working on fixing it. We don't owe anyone more explanation than that." But I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Maya's daycare teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been caring for her since she was 18 months old. She knew every detail of Maya's routine, every quirk of her personality, every change in her appearance or behavior. She would notice immediately that something had happened, and she would want to make sure Maya felt comfortable and supported. "I should call Mrs. Rodriguez tonight too," I added. "Give her a heads up so she can help Maya handle any comments from the other kids." "Good thinking," David agreed. "What about your work? Are you going to take time off to deal with the salon appointments?" The practical considerations kept piling up like stones in my chest. I worked as a part-time graphic designer for a small firm, a job that offered flexibility but also meant that missed hours translated directly to missed income. Taking time off for multiple salon visits, for family meetings, for whatever emotional support Maya might need, it all had financial implications that we hadn't considered in the immediate crisis. "I'll figure it out," I said, adding it to the growing mental list of problems that needed solutions. "I'll pay for your lost wages too," Jessica said quickly. "Whatever this costs, the salon, your time off work, anything Maya needs, I'll cover it." David and I exchanged another glance. Money wouldn't fix this, but Jessica's willingness to take financial responsibility was at least a step in the right direction. "We should call your parents now," David said, checking his watch. "It's getting late, and this isn't the kind of conversation to rush through." I felt my stomach clench with anxiety. Mom and Dad lived in Arizona now, enjoying their retirement in a golf community outside Phoenix. Dad still kept military hours, waking at 0500 and going to bed by 2100, which meant we had a narrow window for phone calls that wouldn't catch them at inconvenient times. "Sarah," Jessica said, her voice small, "what if Dad says I can never see Maya again?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. What if he did? What if our father, with his military sense of duty and protection, decided that Jessica's judgment was so compromised that she posed a danger to his granddaughter? "He won't," I said, though I wasn't entirely certain. Dad believes in consequences, but he also believes in redemption. You just have to show him that you understand the seriousness of what happened. "And that you have a plan for making sure it doesn't happen again?" David added. Jessica nodded, taking deep breaths like someone preparing for a difficult physical task. "Okay, let's call them." I retrieved our phone from the kitchen, noting that the scattered curls had been swept up, probably by David while I was upstairs with Maya. The clean floor somehow made the whole situation feel more final, more irreversible. The evidence was gone, but the consequences remained. As I dialed my parents' number, I tried to prepare myself for the conversation that was about to unfold. Dad would be shocked, then angry, then analytical, as he worked through the implications and necessary responses. Mom would be heartbroken, focused immediately on Maya's emotional well-being and the family dynamics that would need repair. The phone rang twice before Dad's familiar voice answered. "Sarah, everything okay? You don't usually call on Tuesday nights." Even after all these years, Dad's first assumption when he received an unexpected call was that something was wrong. Military training, perhaps, or just the instincts of a man who had spent decades responding to emergencies and crises. "Hi, Dad. Mom there too? We need to talk to both of you about something important." I heard rustling as Dad put the phone on speaker, then Mom's voice joining the call. "Hi, sweetheart. Hi, David. Is Maya okay?" "Maya's fine," I said quickly, then paused as I realized how relative that statement was. "I mean, she's not hurt. But something happened today that you need to know about." "What kind of something?" Dad's voice had shifted into the tone he used when gathering information for decision-making. I looked at Jessica, who was sitting on the edge of the couch like someone preparing to jump from a great height. "Jessica is here with us, and she has something to tell you." Another pause, this one filled with the kind of tension that builds before difficult truths are revealed. "Jessica?" Mom's voice was gentle but concerned. "What happened, honey?" Jessica took a shaky breath. "Mom, Dad, I made a terrible mistake today. I was watching Maya while Sarah ran errands and I cut Maya's hair. I cut off all her beautiful curls." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could picture my parents in their Arizona living room, Dad probably in his leather recliner with the evening news muted on the television. Mom likely on the couch with her knitting or a book. I could imagine them processing Jessica's words, trying to understand what they had just heard. "You cut her hair." Dad's voice was carefully controlled. "How much hair, Jessica?" "All of it," Jessica whispered. "It's really short now, really uneven. I used kitchen scissors and I didn't know what I was doing and I thought it would be cute." "Jesus Christ," Dad said, his military composure slipping for just a moment before he caught himself. "Sorry, Lord." "Jessica, what were you thinking?" "I wasn't thinking," Jessica replied honestly. "That's the problem. I saw something on Pinterest, and I thought Maya would look adorable with shorter hair. And I didn't ask Sarah's permission or think about whether I knew how to cut hair properly. I just did it." "Pinterest," Mom repeated, her voice faint with disbelief. "You cut your niece's hair because of something you saw on Pinterest." "Yes," Jessica said, and I could hear her crying again. "I know how horrible that sounds. I know how stupid it was. I'm so sorry." David leaned forward, speaking toward the phone. "General Mason, Mrs. Mason, we wanted to call you tonight because Maya has a video call with you tomorrow, and we knew you'd notice her appearance immediately. We're going to take her to a professional salon to see what can be fixed, but the damage is done." Dad finished. "How is Maya handling this? Is she upset?" "She seems okay," I said. "She's 3, so she doesn't really understand what happened. She knows her hair looks different, but she's adapting. I'm more worried about how other people will react when they see her." "And how are you handling this, Sarah?" Mom asked, her voice full of the maternal concern that had guided me through every crisis of my childhood. The question opened a floodgate of emotion I had been holding back for hours. "I'm angry," I admitted. I'm hurt that Jessica made such a major decision about Maya's appearance without asking me. I'm sad that Maya's beautiful hair is gone. I'm worried about how this affects our family relationships. Those are all reasonable feelings, Dad said, his voice gentle in the way it got when he was shifting from commander mode to father mode. Jessica, what do you have to say to your sister and brother-in-law? I'm sorry, Jessica said immediately. I'm so incredibly sorry. I know that's not enough, but I genuinely thought I was doing something nice. I thought Sarah would be happy when she came home and saw how cute Maya looked. I never meant to hurt anyone. Good intentions don't excuse poor judgment, Dad said firmly. You made a decision about your niece's body without consulting her parents. That's not acceptable, regardless of your motivations. I know, Jessica whispered. What's your plan for making this right? Dad continued, and I recognized the tone he had used when Jessica and I were children, and had disappointed him. It wasn't angry exactly, but it was uncompromising in its expectation of accountability. I'm paying for whatever it costs to fix her hair, Jessica said. Professional salon, multiple appointments if necessary, Sarah's lost wages from work. And David thinks I shouldn't be alone with Maya for a while. David's right, Dad said without hesitation. Jessica, you've shown poor judgment in a situation involving your niece's well-being. Until you can demonstrate that you understand the seriousness of what happened and have developed better decision-making skills, you shouldn't be responsible for Maya's care. The finality in his voice made Jessica's sobs audible even through the phone. I felt a pang of sympathy for my sister, even though I agreed with Dad's assessment. For how long, Mom asked, speaking the question that Jessica probably couldn't manage. That depends on Jessica, Dad replied. On how she handles this situation, what she learns from it, and what changes she makes to ensure it doesn't happen again. What kind of changes? Jessica asked through her tears. That's for you to figure out, Dad said. But I'd suggest starting with understanding why you thought it was acceptable to make such a decision without permission, and what systems you need in place to prevent similar lapses in judgment. I heard Mom sigh, a sound that carried 26 years of managing family crises and mediating between Dad's military expectations and his daughter's human imperfections. Jessica, honey, Mom said gently, your father is right that this was a serious mistake. But we love you, and we know you love Maya. This doesn't make you a bad person, but it does mean you need to do some thinking about boundaries and responsibility. I know, Jessica said. I just don't know where to start. Start with apologizing to Maya when she's old enough to understand what happened, Dad suggested. Start with keeping your word about paying for the fixes and showing up for whatever conversations need to happen. Start with asking yourself why you thought your aesthetic preferences were more important than Sarah's parental decisions. Each suggestion hit its mark, and I could see Jessica absorbing them like someone taking notes for a test she couldn't afford to fail. We'll drive out for a visit next month, Mom said. Originally, we were planning to come for Maya's 4th birthday in July, but maybe we should move that up. You don't need to change your plans, I said quickly, though part of me desperately wanted the support and guidance that my parents' presence would provide. We want to, Dad said. We want to see Maya, and we want to help our family work through this. Jessica, are you planning to stay in town for a while? Yes, Jessica said. I'm not going anywhere until this is resolved. Good. That's a start. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, covering practical details about salon appointments and emotional support for Maya, expectations for Jessica's behavior during the healing process, and family dynamics that would need attention in the coming weeks. When we finally hung up, the three of us sat in the living room's growing darkness, each processing what had just transpired. Dad's response had been exactly what I had expected: firm, fair, and focused on accountability. Mom's had been more emotional but equally clear about the need for consequences and change. I should go, Jessica said quietly. You all need some family time, and I need to think about everything Dad said. Where will you stay? I asked. Jessica's apartment was 40 minutes away, and she had been planning to spend the night in our guest room. I'll drive home. I need the time to think anyway. David stood up, moving toward the stairs. I'm gonna go check on Maya, see if she's ready for dinner. As his footsteps faded upstairs, Jessica and I were left alone in the living room where we had played as children during visits to Grandma Rose. The familiarity of the space made the current tension feel even more surreal. "Sarah," Jessica said, "I know you probably can't forgive me right now, but I want you to know that I understand why you're angry. I understand why David doesn't trust me with Maya. I understand why Dad thinks I showed poor judgment." "Do you?" I asked. "Because 6 hours ago you thought cutting a 3-year-old's hair without permission was a good idea." Jessica flinched, but she didn't argue. "You're right. 6 hours ago I was thinking like someone who gets to be the fun aunt who shows up and leaves, not like someone who has real responsibility for Maya's well-being." It was the most insightful thing she had said all day, and it gave me the first small spark of hope that maybe she could learn from this experience. "That's exactly right," I said. "Being Maya's aunt isn't just about fun activities and cute photos. It's about supporting David and me as her parents, respecting our decisions, and putting her needs ahead of your impulses." "I know that now," Jessica said. "I should have known it before." She gathered her purse and jacket from the chair where she had left them in what felt like a lifetime ago, back when the biggest concern of the day was whether Maya would eat her vegetables at lunch. "I'll call some salons tomorrow morning," she said. "I'll find the best one in the area and make an appointment as soon as possible." "Okay." "And Sarah, I know this doesn't fix anything, but I really am sorry. Not just sorry I got caught or sorry there are consequences, but sorry I hurt you and Maya and David." I studied my sister's face, looking for the sincerity I needed to hear. "I believe you're sorry," I said. "But being sorry isn't enough, you have to do better." "I will," Jessica promised. "I don't know how yet, but I will." After she left, I sat alone in the living room for several minutes, listening to the sounds of David and Maya upstairs, water running in the bathroom, Maya's voice chattering about her movie, David's deeper tones responding with the patience and love that made him such a good father. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, explaining Maya's appearance to her daycare teacher, finding a salon that could work with damaged hair on a 3-year-old, managing the emotional fallout of a family crisis that was far from resolved. But tonight, I just wanted to hold my daughter and husband close, to remember what we were all fighting to protect, and to begin the long process of healing from a wound that would leave scars long after Maya's hair grew back. The next morning arrived with the cruel indifference of ordinary time continuing despite extraordinary circumstances. Sunlight streamed through Maya's bedroom curtains, illuminating the small face that looked so different from the child who had gone to sleep the night before. Her hair stuck up at odd angles, the uneven cuts creating a wild, almost punk rock appearance that would have been endearing on a teenager but looked heartbreaking on my 3-year-old daughter. "Mama, my hair feels funny," Maya announced, reaching up to pat the shortened strands with sleepy confusion. "It's just different, baby," I said, helping her out of her toddler bed and trying to keep my voice light. "Let's get you dressed for school." David had already left for an early shift at the station, but he had kissed both Maya and me goodbye with extra tenderness, his hand lingering on my shoulder in a gesture that said everything about his understanding of the difficult day ahead. We had talked until nearly midnight, about logistics and emotions, about boundaries and forgiveness, about how to protect Maya while still maintaining family relationships. Getting Maya ready for daycare proved more challenging than I had anticipated. Her hair, which usually responded to a light misting of water and gentle finger combing, now defied every attempt at styling. The uneven lengths created cowlicks where none had existed before, and no amount of water or product could make the cut look intentional. "I look pretty, Mama?" Maya asked, studying herself in the bathroom mirror with the serious expression she wore when processing new information. "You always look pretty," I said automatically, then paused to really consider her reflection. Despite the disaster of her hair, Maya's brown eyes still sparkled with curiosity, her smile still lit up her entire face, her personality still radiated the joy that made everyone who met her fall in love with her. "You know what, Maya, you look like you. And you being you is the most beautiful thing in the world." She seemed satisfied with this answer, turning from the mirror to hop down from her step stool. "Can I wear my princess dress today?" I almost said no. The pink tulle dress she loved was more appropriate for playdates than daycare, but then I reconsidered. If Maya was going to face questions and stares about her hair, at least she could feel confident in her favorite outfit. "Absolutely," I said. Princess dress day it is. The drive to Little Sprouts daycare took 12 minutes through the familiar neighborhoods that surrounded our house, past the coffee shop where David and I had spent lazy Saturday mornings before Maya was born, past the park where we took evening walks as a family, past the elementary school Maya would attend in 2 years. Everything looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, which somehow made the magnitude of what had changed feel even more surreal. Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting by the front door when we arrived, as she always was during drop-off time. Her warm smile faltered slightly when she saw Maya, and I watched her professional training kick in as she processed the change without letting her shock show. "Good morning, Maya," she said with the same enthusiasm she brought to every greeting. "I love your princess dress today. You look so fancy." Maya beamed and twirled to show off the dress's full skirt. "Aunt Jessie cut my hair yesterday. I look like Princess Anna now." Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes met mine over Maya's head, and I saw the questions there. In our brief phone conversation the night before, I had given her only the basics. A family member had cut Maya's hair, it hadn't gone well, and Maya might need extra emotional support if other children commented. "Well, you certainly do look like a princess," Mrs. Rodriguez said diplomatically. "Why don't you go put your backpack in your cubby and then join us for morning circle time?" As Maya skipped toward the classroom, Mrs. Rodriguez touched my arm gently. "How is she really doing? And how are you doing?" The kindness in her voice nearly undid my careful composure. Mrs. Rodriguez had been caring for Maya since she was barely walking, had celebrated every milestone and soothed every disappointment, had become almost like family over the past year and a half. "She seems okay," I said quietly, "but I'm worried about how the other kids will react." "We'll keep a close eye on things," Mrs. Rodriguez assured me. At this age, children are usually more accepting of differences than adults expect. But if there are any issues, we'll handle them gently and call you right away. I nodded, grateful for her experience and professionalism. There's more to the story, but Maya doesn't need to know the adult complications. As far as she's concerned, her aunt made a mistake and we're fixing it. Understood. When will you be able to take her to get it properly cut? Today, hopefully. My sister is calling salons this morning to find someone who can work with damaged hair on a 3-year-old. Mrs. Rodriguez squeezed my arm sympathetically. "I've been doing this for 15 years, Sarah. Trust me, I've seen every kind of family crisis imaginable. Maya is loved and secure, and that's what matters most. Hair grows back." As I drove away from the daycare, I tried to hold on to Mrs. Rodriguez's words of comfort, but anxiety sat heavy in my chest like a stone. How many other conversations would I need to have today? How many people would stare at Maya and wonder what had happened? How many times would I need to explain that yes, a family member had made a mistake, and no, we didn't want to discuss the details? My phone rang as I pulled into the parking lot of my office building. Jessica's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with a mixture of hope and dread. "I found a salon," she said without preamble. "Children's Cuts and More, downtown. They specialize in fixing bad haircuts on kids." The stylist I talked to, Michelle, said she's seen cases like this before, and she can see Maya at 2 o'clock this afternoon. This afternoon? I felt a mixture of relief and panic. That's so soon. I figured sooner was better. Maya doesn't need to go through more days of people staring at her. And Sarah, Michelle said to prepare you. She might not be able to save much length. She'll need to cut it even shorter to make it look even and healthy. The words hit me like a physical blow. Shorter. Maya's hair, which had never been cut beyond trimming split ends, would end up even shorter than Jessica's disastrous attempt. How much shorter? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. She won't know until she sees Maya in person, but she said to think pixie cut length. Maybe shorter in some places where the damage is worst. I closed my eyes, picturing my baby girl with hair cropped close to her scalp, looking like a completely different child. Okay, I'll pick Maya up early from daycare and meet you there. Sarah, Jessica's voice was hesitant. Michelle also said that whoever cut Maya's hair before didn't just use dull scissors. There are places where the hair was pulled so hard that it might have damaged the follicles. Some sections might grow back thinner, or with a different texture. The implications of this revelation settled over me like cold water. Not only was Maya's current appearance dramatically altered, but her hair might never look the same again. The beautiful curls that had been her most distinctive feature could be permanently changed. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that Jessica might have caused permanent damage to Maya's hair." "It's possible." Michelle said it's too early to know for sure, but we need to be prepared for that possibility. I sat in my car in the office parking lot, watching other people start their normal Wednesday mornings, and tried to process this new layer of violation. Bad enough that Jessica had cut Maya's hair without permission. Worse, that she had used the wrong tools and created an unevenly chopped mess. But the possibility that she had caused permanent damage to my daughter's appearance felt like a betrayal so profound that I couldn't find words for it. "I have to go," I said abruptly. "I need to call work and arrange to leave early. I'll meet you at the salon at 2. "Sarah, wait!" I hung up before Jessica could finish whatever she was going to say. I needed space to process this information, needed time to figure out how to tell David that the situation was potentially worse than we had realized. My boss, Karen, was understanding when I explained that I had a family emergency and needed to leave by 1:30. She had 2 children of her own and had dealt with her share of childhood crises, so she didn't ask for details beyond confirming that Maya wasn't seriously injured. "Take whatever time you need," she said, which was both a relief and a reminder that missing work meant missing pay that we would need to cover the increasing costs of this disaster. The morning passed in a blur of attempted focus on design projects while my mind cycled through worst-case scenarios. What if Maya's hair never grew back properly? What if the other children at daycare made cruel comments? What if this incident created lasting trust issues between Maya and the adults in her life? At 1:15, my phone rang again. This time it was David. "How's Maya doing at daycare?" he asked immediately. "Mrs. Rodriguez said she'd call if there were any problems, and I haven't heard anything. I'm leaving to pick her up soon for the salon appointment." "Good. Listen, I've been thinking about this all morning, and I want to be there. Can you wait until I get off shift at 3 to take her to the salon?" The offer was tempting. David's presence would provide emotional support for both Maya and me, but I could hear the stress in his voice and knew he was probably having as much trouble concentrating on work as I was. "You don't need to do that," I said. "You've already lost time yesterday coming home early. We can handle the salon." "Sarah, this is our daughter's first professional haircut ever, and it's happening because of a traumatic situation. I want to be there." His insistence reminded me of all the reasons I had fallen in love with him: his commitment to family, his understanding that presence mattered more than convenience, his willingness to prioritize Maya's emotional needs over practical considerations. "Okay," I said. "Can you meet us there at 2? "I'll be there." When I arrived at Little Sprouts to collect Maya, I found her playing happily in the sandbox with 2 other children, her princess dress carefully pinned up to avoid getting dirty. She looked so normal, so perfectly herself, that for a moment I could almost forget about the disaster of her hair. "Mama," she called out when she saw me. "Look, I made a castle." Mrs. Rodriguez appeared beside me, her expression thoughtful. "She's had a good morning," she reported quietly. A couple of the children asked about her hair, but Maya just told them her aunt cut it to make her look like a princess. No drama, no tears. "Any negative reactions?" One little boy said it looked weird, but another child told him it looked cool like a rock star. Maya seemed to take both comments in stride. At this age, they're remarkably adaptable. I felt a surge of pride in my daughter's resilience, mixed with sadness that she needed to be resilient about something that should never have happened to her. "Maya, honey," I called out, "time to go. We have a special appointment to get your hair fixed by a professional." Maya's face lit up with excitement. "Like a real hair salon? Like where you get your hair done?" "Exactly like that, but just for kids." As I buckled Maya into her car seat, she chattered happily about the salon visit, turning it into an adventure rather than a crisis. Her excitement was infectious, and I found myself starting to hope that maybe this experience could be positive, despite its traumatic beginning. The drive downtown took 25 minutes through traffic that seemed heavier than usual, as if the entire city was conspiring to make this day more stressful. Maya entertained herself by singing songs from her favorite animated movies, her voice filling the car with the kind of joy that reminded me of what really mattered. Children's Cuts and More was located in a renovated Victorian house that had been converted into a specialty salon for kids. The waiting area was designed to look like a fairy tale cottage, with child-sized furniture painted in bright colors and walls covered with murals of princesses and dragons and magical forests. Under normal circumstances, Maya would have been enchanted by the whimsical environment. Jessica was already waiting when we arrived, standing near the reception desk with the expression of someone who hadn't slept well. She had changed clothes since yesterday, trading her designer outfit for jeans and a simple blouse that suggested she was taking this situation more seriously than her usual problems. "Hi, Maya Bug," she said softly, kneeling down to Maya's eye level. "Are you excited to get your hair fixed by the nice hair lady?" Maya nodded enthusiastically, apparently holding no grudge against her aunt for the previous day's disaster. "Is it gonna be beautiful, Aunt Jessie?" "I think you're going to look amazing," Jessica said, her voice thick with emotion. "Even more beautiful than you already are." David arrived a few minutes later, still wearing his station uniform and smelling faintly of smoke from whatever call he had been on that morning. His presence immediately made me feel more grounded, more capable of handling whatever was about to happen. "Sorry I'm a little late," he said, kissing Maya's forehead and squeezing my hand. "How's my princess doing?" "Daddy, we're at the hair place. They're gonna make my hair all pretty again." David's eyes met mine over Maya's head, and I saw my own mixture of hope and anxiety reflected in his expression. We were both trying to stay positive for Maya's sake, while privately preparing for the possibility that the damage was worse than we had imagined. "Maya Mason?" A woman with short red hair and a warm smile appeared from the back of the salon. "I'm Michelle, are you ready for your special haircut?" Maya practically bounced with excitement as Michelle led us to a styling chair that had been designed to look like a throne, complete with velvet cushions and golden armrests. The attention to detail in making the experience magical for children was impressive, and I felt grateful that Jessica had found this place. "Now Maya," Michelle said as she draped a small cape around Maya's shoulders, "I need to look at your hair very carefully before I start cutting, okay? I'm gonna touch it and move it around a little bit to see what we're working with." I watched Michelle's face as she examined Maya's hair, looking for any telltale signs of how bad the damage really was. Her expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes when she reached the sections where Jessica's scissors had pulled hardest. "Maya, sweetie, who cut your hair before?" Michelle asked gently. "My Aunt Jessie," Maya replied proudly. "She wanted me to look like Princess Anna." "Well, Aunt Jessica had a very good idea about making you look like a princess," Michelle said diplomatically. "But sometimes when people who aren't hairstylists try to cut hair, it doesn't come out quite right. That's why you need someone like me to fix it up." She turned to address the three adults who were watching anxiously from chairs arranged around the styling station. "I'm going to be honest with you. There's significant damage here. The scissors that were used were too dull, and they pulled rather than cut in several places. I can fix the unevenness and make it look intentional, but Maya's going to end up with very short hair." "How short?" David asked. Michelle demonstrated by holding her fingers about an inch from Maya's scalp. "About this short all over, maybe a little longer on top if I can save some length there." The reality of what this meant settled over me like a heavy blanket. Maya, who had never had more than a trim, was about to lose virtually all of her hair. She would look like a different child, still beautiful, but completely changed. "Maya," I said carefully, "the hair lady is going to need to cut your hair very short to make it look pretty and even. It might look very different from how you're used to seeing yourself. Is that okay?" Maya considered this seriously, her 3-year-old brain processing the concept of major change. "Will I still be me?" The question was so profound that it took my breath away. "Yes, baby, you'll always be you, no matter what your hair looks like." "Then it's okay," Maya said simply, settling back into the throne chair with the acceptance that children bring to experiences they don't fully understand. Michelle smiled at Maya's response. "You're a very brave girl, Maya. I think you're going to love how you look when I'm finished." As Michelle began to work, sectioning Maya's hair and making the first careful cuts, I found myself holding David's hand tightly while watching my daughter's transformation unfold. Each snip of the scissors removed more evidence of the child she had been yesterday, revealing the different child she would be from now on. Jessica stood slightly apart from David and me, her arms wrapped around herself as if she were cold. I could see her struggling with the visual evidence of what her impulsive decision had cost, with the understanding that Maya's appearance was being permanently altered because of her poor judgment. There are some areas where the follicles might be damaged, Michelle said quietly to the adults while Maya was distracted by the spinning chair. You'll need to watch how the hair grows back over the next few months. If it comes in patchy or with a different texture, there are treatments that can help, but it might always be a little different. The words hit Jessica like physical blows, and I saw her face crumple with the understanding that she hadn't just given Maya a bad haircut, she had potentially changed her appearance permanently. I didn't know, Jessica whispered. I swear I didn't know I could cause permanent damage. That's exactly the problem, David said quietly, his voice tight with controlled anger. You didn't know, but you did it anyway. Michelle continued working, her skilled hands transforming Maya's destroyed hair into something that looked intentional and styled. The pixie cut that emerged was actually quite flattering, emphasizing Maya's large brown eyes and delicate bone structure. But it also made her look years older, less like the baby she still was in my mind and more like the little girl she was becoming. All done, Michelle announced, spinning the chair so Maya could see herself in the mirror. What do you think, Princess Maya? Maya's reaction was immediate and joyful. I look like Tinker Bell, she exclaimed, reaching up to touch her newly short hair. It's so soft, Mama, feel how soft it is. I reached out to touch Maya's hair, noting how different the texture felt without the weight of her curls. It was soft, but it was also strange, like touching a different child entirely. It's beautiful, baby, I said, and I meant it. Maya did look beautiful, just completely different from the child who had woken up that morning. David took photos with his phone while Maya posed and giggled, making faces at herself in the mirror and clearly delighted with her new appearance. His smile looked genuine, but I could see the sadness in his eyes as he captured images of our daughter's dramatically altered look. Now, Maya, Michelle said as she removed the cape from around Maya's shoulders, your hair is going to need some special care while it grows back. No more kitchen scissors, okay? Only professional hairstylists should cut hair. Okay, Maya agreed cheerfully, hopping down from the chair. Can we come back when it gets long again? Absolutely. I'd love to see you again. As we prepared to leave the salon, Jessica approached the reception desk to pay. The total was $150, expensive for a children's haircut, but reasonable considering the complexity of fixing the damage and the skill required to make it look good. Thank you, Jessica said to Michelle, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for making her look beautiful again. Michelle's expression softened as she looked at Jessica's devastated face. Honey, mistakes happen. What matters is that you're taking responsibility for fixing it. Maya's gonna be fine. But as we walked out of the salon, I wasn't sure any of us were going to be fine. Maya skipped ahead, running her hands through her short hair and chattering about how she looked like a fairy. But the rest of us moved with the heavy step of people carrying emotional weight. I should get back to the station, David said when we reached our cars. But Sarah, can we talk tonight, after Maya goes to bed? I nodded, understanding that there were still conversations to be had, decisions to be made about how our family would move forward from this incident. Jessica, David said, turning to my sister, I meant what I said yesterday about not being alone with Maya for a while. Today showed me that the consequences of your decision are even more serious than we initially thought. Jessica's face crumpled, but she nodded acceptance. I understand. As David drove away and I buckled Maya into her car seat, I felt the full weight of exhaustion settling over me. The salon visit had resolved the immediate crisis of Maya's appearance, but it had also highlighted the long-term implications of Jessica's actions. Mama, are you sad about my hair? Maya asked as we drove home. Sarah's world tilted off its axis the moment she walked through her front door on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday evening. The house felt different, too quiet, with an undercurrent of tension that immediately put her maternal instincts on high alert. Her 3-year-old daughter Maya came running toward her with typical enthusiasm, but something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Maya's beautiful, thick curls, the gorgeous ringlets that had been her defining feature since birth, the hair that strangers complimented in grocery stores and that filled family photo albums were gone. Completely gone, In their place was a choppy, uneven disaster that looked like it had been attacked by a lawnmower. "Mama, look, Aunt Jessie made me pretty," Maya announced with 3-year-old excitement, completely unaware that her appearance had been dramatically and permanently altered. Sarah's sister Jessica sat on the living room couch, surrounded by piles of Maya's severed curls, holding a pair of kitchen scissors with the expression of someone who was just beginning to understand the magnitude of what she had done. The scene was surreal, like walking into a crime scene where the victim was cheerfully celebrating her own assault. "Sarah, I can explain," Jessica began, but the words died in her throat as she saw her sister's face transform from confusion to horror to rage. The sight of her daughter's ruined hair triggered something primal in Sarah. This wasn't just about appearance. This was about trust, boundaries, and the fundamental violation of parental authority. Jessica had made an irreversible decision about Maya's body without permission, without consultation, without any consideration for the consequences. "What did you do?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible as she knelt beside Maya, running her fingers through what remained of her daughter's hair. Each touch revealed more damage. Chunks missing here, uneven lengths there, areas cut so short that Maya's scalp was visible. Jessica's explanation came tumbling out in a rush of words. She had been playing with Maya, thought it would be fun to give her a trim, wanted to surprise Sarah with how cute Maya would look with shorter hair. The reasoning was so shallow, so thoughtless, that it made Sarah's anger burn even hotter. "You used kitchen scissors on a 3-year-old's hair?" Sarah's voice was rising now, her composure cracking. "You made a permanent decision about my daughter's appearance without asking me?" Maya, sensing the adult tension despite not understanding its source, pressed closer to her mother. "Mama, don't you like my hair?" "Aunt Jessie said I look like Tinkerbell." The innocence in Maya's voice broke Sarah's heart. Her daughter had no idea that something precious had been taken from her, that years of careful nurturing and growth had been destroyed in minutes of thoughtless impulse. When David, Sarah's husband and Maya's father, arrived home from his shift as a firefighter, his reaction was even more intense than Sarah's had been. David prided himself on being level-headed in emergencies. He had rescued people from burning buildings, performed CPR on accident victims, made life-or-death decisions under pressure. But seeing his daughter's destroyed hair triggered a parental fury that caught him off guard. "Get out," he said to Jessica, his voice deadly quiet. "Get out of my house right now." The next morning brought the harsh reality of damage assessment. Sarah took Maya to the best children's salon in the city, hoping that professional intervention could somehow salvage the situation. The stylist, a kind woman named Maria with decades of experience, examined Maya's hair with growing dismay. "I'm so sorry," Maria said gently. "There's really only one option. We have to cut it all off and start over." The pixie cut that resulted was actually adorable. Maya looked like a fairy princess, all eyes and cheekbones and delicate features. But for Sarah, every glance at her daughter was a reminder of what had been lost. Those thick, beautiful curls that had taken 3 years to grow might never come back the same way. Some types of hair trauma could permanently alter texture and growth patterns. Maya, with the resilience of a 3-year-old, adapted to her new look with enthusiasm. She loved that she looked like Tinkerbell, loved that her hair dried quickly after baths, loved the compliments from strangers who found her pixie cut charming. It was the adults who struggled with the change. The adults who understood that some losses can't be undone. What had started as a family crisis quickly expanded into something much larger. When David posted photos of Maya's new haircut on Facebook, trying to put a positive spin on the situation, friends and family members immediately began asking questions. The comments ranged from curious to concerned. "Wow, such a dramatic change. What made you decide to go so short? She looks so different. I almost didn't recognize her. Did something happen to her hair? This seems like a pretty drastic cut for a 3-year-old." Suddenly, Sarah and David found themselves having to explain to everyone in their social circle why their daughter suddenly had a pixie cut. David's mother called within hours of seeing the photos, her grandmother's intuition immediately sensing that something was wrong. "Jessica cut her hair?" Carol's voice was careful, as if she were trying to process information that didn't make sense. "Without asking you?" The phone call with David's mother was just the beginning. Sarah's parents, both retired military, reacted to the news with the kind of controlled fury that comes from years of dealing with people who make decisions outside their authority. Within 24 hours, both sets of grandparents had made plans to fly in from across the country. Sarah's mother put it most bluntly: "Someone violated your child's body without permission. This is not a situation you handle alone." The word violated hit Sarah like a physical blow. She hadn't thought of it in those terms, but her mother was right. Jessica had made a decision about Maya's physical appearance without consent, had permanently altered how her daughter looked, had crossed a boundary that went far beyond simple family dynamics. When both sets of grandparents arrived, the atmosphere in Sarah and David's home was thick with tension. Maya, oblivious to the adult drama swirling around her, was thrilled to have all her grandparents visiting at once. She showed off her pixie cut proudly, spinning in circles and declaring herself to be Tinkerbell. But the adults had serious business to conduct. Sarah's father, a retired Air Force general, with decades of experience in accountability and consequences, took charge of the family meeting with military precision. "I want to hear exactly what happened. In your own words, Jessica," he said without preamble. "No excuses, no justifications, just the facts." Jessica, who had spent her adult life avoiding difficult conversations and uncomfortable consequences, was finally being forced to face the full weight of her actions. She recounted the events of that Tuesday afternoon, how she had been enjoying her time with Maya, how the idea of cutting Maya's hair had seemed like a fun surprise, how she had used kitchen scissors without considering the consequences. Sarah's father listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with each detail. When Jessica finished, he was quiet for a long moment, processing what he had heard. "Let me make sure I understand," he said finally. "You made a permanent decision about your niece's physical appearance without consulting her parents, using inappropriate tools, with no training or experience, because you thought it would be cute." "Yes," Jessica whispered. "Jessica, what you did was a violation of trust and boundaries that goes far beyond a simple mistake." The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. Jessica was forced to acknowledge not just the immediate harm she had caused, but the pattern of impulsive decision-making that had led to this crisis. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern of Jessica making choices based on what she wanted in the moment rather than what was appropriate or considerate. Under pressure from both sets of grandparents, Jessica made specific commitments. She would never make decisions about Maya's physical appearance, health, or well-being without explicit permission from Sarah and David. She would ask before changing Maya's clothes, before taking her anywhere not previously discussed, before giving her food that wasn't approved. She accepted that she wouldn't have unsupervised access to Maya until she had proven through consistent actions that she could respect boundaries. Most importantly, Jessica committed to attending counseling to address the underlying issues that had led to such poor judgment. The consequences extended far beyond just Jessica's relationship with Maya. Sarah struggled with feelings of rage, betrayal, and protective fury that surprised her with their intensity. She found herself questioning every family interaction, wondering what other boundaries might be violated when she wasn't watching. The relationship between the sisters was fundamentally changed. Sarah loved Jessica, but she now understood that love alone wasn't enough. Trust had to be rebuilt through actions, not words. The easy intimacy they had shared, the assumption that Jessica would always act in Maya's best interests, was gone. David, typically the more optimistic of the two parents, found himself grappling with his own anger and the challenge of modeling appropriate responses for Maya. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that someone who loves her made a choice that hurt her, without destroying her ability to trust the adults in her life? The grandparents' involvement proved crucial. Their perspective helped Sarah and David understand that this crisis was about more than just Maya's hair. It was about establishing clear boundaries and consequences that would protect Maya throughout her childhood. They also provided the emotional support that Sarah and David needed to navigate their own complex feelings. Sarah's father's military background proved particularly valuable. He understood that accountability without support was punishment, while support without accountability was enabling. Jessica needed both consequences for her actions and help in changing the patterns that had led to those actions. Over the following weeks, the family began the slow work of rebuilding trust. Jessica followed through on her commitments, attending counseling sessions, and demonstrating respect for the boundaries that had been established. Her visits with Maya were supervised, but gradually the interactions became more natural, as Jessica proved she could prioritize Maya's needs over her own impulses. Maya, with the resilience that children possess, adapted to her new appearance and eventually grew to love her pixie cut. She discovered that short hair was easier to manage, dried quickly after swimming, and made her feel grown up. The trauma that the adults feared might affect her never materialized, partly because of her age, but mostly because the adults around her handled the crisis with honesty and accountability, rather than secrecy and shame. The most significant change was in Jessica herself. The counseling helped her understand that her pattern of impulsive decision-making stemmed from a combination of factors: difficulty with impulse control, a tendency to prioritize short-term gratification over long-term consequences, and a history of being forgiven for poor choices without having to face real accountability. For the first time in her adult life, Jessica was forced to confront the impact of her actions on other people. Really confront it, not just offer superficial apologies and expect forgiveness. The process was painful, but transformative. As the family worked through the immediate crisis, they began to understand that Jessica's actions had revealed larger issues about boundaries, consent, and respect within their family system. How many other decisions had Jessica made over the years that prioritized her wants over other people's rights? How many times had family members overlooked boundary violations because they loved Jessica and wanted to keep the peace? The haircutting incident became a catalyst for broader conversations about family dynamics. Sarah and David established clearer expectations not just for Jessica, but for all the adults in Maya's life. They created protocols for decision-making about Maya's care, explicit boundaries about what was and wasn't acceptable, and consequences for violations. These conversations were difficult, but necessary. The family discovered that their previous approach, relying on love and good intentions to guide behavior, wasn't sufficient to protect Maya from well-meaning adults who might make poor choices. 6 months later, Maya's hair had grown into a cute bob, and the immediate crisis had faded into family history. But the lessons learned during those difficult weeks continued to shape family interactions. Jessica's relationship with Maya was rebuilt gradually, based on demonstrated respect for boundaries rather than assumptions about good intentions. Jessica proved through consistent actions that she had learned from her mistake, asking permission before making even minor decisions about Maya's care, thinking through consequences before acting on impulses, and accepting accountability when she made errors in judgment. Sarah's relationship with Jessica was forever changed, but not necessarily damaged. They developed a new kind of closeness based on honesty about difficult topics rather than avoidance of conflict. Sarah learned that protecting Maya sometimes meant having uncomfortable conversations with people she loved. David discovered that his protective instincts as a father could be channeled into advocacy and boundary setting rather than just anger. He became more intentional about teaching Maya to recognize and communicate about boundaries, even at her young age. The grandparents. Involvement strengthened the family's support system while also establishing clearer expectations about roles and responsibilities. Everyone understood that loving Maya meant respecting her parents, authority, and her own bodily autonomy. Perhaps the most important outcome was Maya's growing understanding that she had rights regarding her own body, even as a young child. The adults around her consistently reinforced that no one should make decisions about her appearance, her comfort, or her care without appropriate permission and consideration. This lesson was delivered through age-appropriate conversations about bodies, boundaries, and consent, concepts that would serve Maya well throughout her life. Rather than being traumatized by Jessica's poor choice, Maya was empowered by seeing how the adults around her responded to protect her and hold each other accountable. The family also developed new traditions around major decisions affecting Maya. Haircuts became collaborative events where Maya had input into her appearance. Family members asked before hugging, before changing her clothes, before making decisions about her activities. These practices taught Maya that her voice mattered, and that she had the right to advocate for herself. 3 years later, Maya's hair had grown back into beautiful waves, different from her original curls but lovely in their own way. More importantly, she had grown up in a family system that prioritized her well-being and autonomy, that handled conflict with honesty and accountability, and that demonstrated that mistakes could become opportunities for growth and stronger relationships. Jessica had become a different kind of aunt, one who thought before acting, who asked permission instead of seeking forgiveness, and who had learned to manage her impulses in ways that respected other people's boundaries. Her relationship with Maya was closer than ever, built on a foundation of earned trust rather than assumed good intentions. Sarah and David had learned that protecting their daughter sometimes required difficult conversations and uncomfortable confrontations with people they loved. They had also learned that children could be remarkably resilient when the adults around them handled crises with integrity and transparency. The family's story became a testament to the power of accountability, the importance of boundaries, and the possibility of healing even from serious violations of trust. It was a reminder that love alone isn't enough. Healthy relationships require respect, consideration, and the willingness to face difficult truths about our own behavior and its impact on others. Maya grew up knowing this story, not as a tale of trauma, but as an example of how families can work through serious problems when people are willing to take responsibility for their actions and commit to doing better. She learned that mistakes don't define us, but our response to them does. The haircut had grown back, the trust had been rebuilt, and the family had emerged from their crisis not unchanged, but stronger for having faced it together with courage, honesty, and love. This story shows how family crises can become opportunities for growth when handled with accountability and love. If you want to hear more compelling family stories like this one, please share this video with someone who might relate to these complex family dynamics. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that explore the challenges we all face. Hi, I know.